when I uncovered Karen Martinez's dark secrets? Could I expose her before she buried my dream for good? It was a crisp autumn morning, the sun just peeking over the horizon, casting golden hues across the freshly mowed lawn of what I believed was my new home. Excitement bubbled inside me as I stepped through the front door, each creak of the hardwood welcoming me into the cozy embrace of a place I had dreamed of calling my own. I smiled to myself, picturing the dining room filled with laughter during holiday gatherings, families sprawled out on the plush living room carpet, and cozy evenings spent by the fireplace. Little did I know my dream was about to shatter into a million pieces. The sound of rustling behind me jolted me from my daydream. I turned, my heart racing, and came face to face with another family standing in my living room, eyes wide with shock and confusion. They held a set of house keys identical to mine, which dangled between them as though taunting me. My heart sank as I noticed the familiar smug smile plastered on the face of Karen Martinez, our realtor, who seemed to revel in the chaos she had orchestrated. In that moment, I felt the stomach-churning dread of reality crashing over me. What had seemed like the perfect transaction had quickly unraveled into a nightmare, as I could see that both family myself and this newcomer held signed contracts for the property. Questions flooded my mind as I struggled to process the situation. Did someone make a mistake? Was this all a cruel joke? My gut sank further as the unsettling truth began to surface. We had both been swindled by the same woman who had promised each of us the home of our dreams. "Karen, what is going on?" I stammered, my voice trembling with disbelief and anger. The warm autumn sun now felt cold against my skin as I felt the frustrated pulse of my heart. I couldn't look away from Karen's face. Every moment we shared became a battle of wills. Karen shrugged, her expression feigning innocence, but the glint in her eyes told another story. "It's just business, darling. You can't really expect me to turn down a good offer, can you?" she retorted, her tone dripping with condescension. Fury bubbled within me like a volcano ready to erupt. I had trusted her. I had poured my life savings into securing this house, convinced that I was making a wise investment for my future. The nights spent poring over listings, the endless open houses, this was how I'd imagined my story would unfold. Today, however, Karen's betrayal made a mockery of all my hopes and dreams. How could a realtor play both sides and profit from our pain? I felt trapped in a vortex of frustration and powerlessness. As the reality dawned on both families, tempers flared, and the once welcoming atmosphere turned sour. We were entangled in a mess that felt too surreal to be real. While the other family and I glared at each other, grappling with disbelief and betrayal, Karen casually tapped away on her phone, as if this were merely an inconvenience for her. I felt as though the walls were closing in on me, the weight of injustice pressing down harder with each tick of the clock. Frustration morphed into resentment as I watched her relish the turmoil. How could she look so calm, while two families were about to lose everything they had worked for? Thoughts of furious lawsuits began brewing in my mind. Could we band together to take her down? Should we confront her, or would that only amplify the chaos? These questions spun through my head like a tempest, and I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. I couldn't fathom how it had come to this. The sun now cast long shadows across the living room, reflecting the darkness that had seeped into what I had once viewed as my sanctuary. In that stillness of confusion and disbelief, I began to realize that I was only on the precipice of a long, tumultuous journey. Unbeknownst to me, this would be the start of a battle against a cunning manipulator who had hidden her true intentions beneath a veneer of professionalism. As I stood my ground, preparing to confront the storm ahead, I felt a flicker of defiance ignite within me. I was no longer just a victim. I was determined to fight for justice. Little did I know that uncovering Karen's tangled web of deceit would take me down a path I never expected, one filled with suspicion, betrayal, and an unbreakable resolve. As the two families faced each other, locked in a standoff with our shared adversary, a chilling sense of foreboding whispered through the air. Who was really in control? And what would we discover about Karen Martinez that had remained hidden in the shadows? Soon, our lives would entwine in ways none of us could have predicted. Days turned into an endless purgatory of angry phone calls and frantic emails. The sun sang its evening lullaby over the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple as I sat at my cluttered kitchen table, the echoes of my voice haunting me with each unanswered call. I cursed the clock as it ticked away the moments I wanted. Back moments I had imagined, lounging in my new living room. Moments where the world was right, the home welcomed me with open arms. But now, my heart felt as heavy as the dark clouds looming outside. The light of my dream had dimmed. Karen Martinez, our treacherous realtor, had spun a web of confusion, manipulating my trust into something grotesque. "Just a misunderstanding," she'd chirp over the phone, sweetness coating her tongue like poison. But it was evident, glaringly so, that she had double-dipped, selling the same house for two commissions. Angry, frantic family members on both ends of the phone, questions circling like hungry vultures over fresh carrion who would claim ownership of this hellish reality we found ourselves in. As I tried to piece together our contracts, Karen zoomed around them, dodging our inquiries like a skilled matador, holding the dagger behind her back while laughing with the crowd. I could feel the walls of my sanity closing in on me, the noose of anxiety tightening with each breath. My phone vibrated again. Another unanswered question to a voice that wouldn't agree to meet face to face, taking cheap shots from the safety of her professional bubble. The sounds of the day, the rustling of leaves outside, the distant chatter of neighbors felt tainted by her betrayal, as if even the universe conspired against me. She thrived in the chaos of our confusion, unwavering while we faltered. Then, just as I thought I had my footing, she casually mentioned the words that sent chills down my spine: paperwork discrepancies. Those 3 words hung in the air like a sudden gust of wind sweeping through the autumn leaves. What did she mean by that? How deep had her deception infiltrated my life? My heart thundered in my chest as I envisioned the paperwork, envisioned her sly smirk as she crafted lies, forging signatures, arranging chaotic realities that now spiraled around me. My mind raced as I realized that there were depths to this ocean of deception that I hadn't even begun to touch. Sitting in those dimly lit hours, the sun disappearing into dark velvet night, I knew I had to confront her, the mastermind behind this madness, and demand clarity, or some semblance of truth. But each time I envisioned that meeting, a knot formed in my stomach. What if she had laid enough groundwork to manipulate even my own recollections? As I tried to concoct a plan, I felt like a pawn in her game while she reveled in a world of her deceit, saving herself the backlash of her actions. Frustration bubbled with each passing moment as I paced my small kitchen, the shadows dancing on the walls, illuminating memories of dreams turning into shadows of dread. Clenching my fists, I thought about the other family and how they must be scrambling, just as I was. Manicure making promises that crumbled like dried leaves at the first frost toe. Could I allow myself to fall further into Karen's trap when I could be rising? I needed to pick a direction, any direction, and confront her sham head-on before it swallowed me whole. It was time to gather evidence and rally. My fingers danced over my keyboard, each click bringing me closer to the truth, the possibility of exposing Karen for what she really was. The glow of my laptop screen illuminated the passion burning within me, a flickering flame that whispered, "Don't give up." My gut clenched with the urgency to reclaim my life, to not let her dark shadow eclipse my dreams any longer. I would dig deep, and I would dive deeper into Karen's world of deceit than anyone ever dared to go. As I peeled back the layers of her carefully constructed facade, a chilling thought invaded my mind. How many more families had she trapped like this? But each lead I followed only served to tighten the screws of urgency. Without a proper plan, I might just be one more victim in this terrible saga. I didn't want to go down without a fight. She had underestimated me from the very beginning. In the stark silence of that night, I created a strategy within myself. The very next day, I would confront Karen. I would demand clarity, demand answers. Facing her would not only be a personal showdown, but the beginning of something larger, something that perhaps meant my fight was no longer just for me. Surely, I wasn't alone in this plight, and perhaps a coalition of us might finally shed the light on this darkness overshadowing our lives. As I prepared to dim the screen of my laptop, driven but shaky, a soft, unexpected knock on the door sent my heart racing again. What more could this mean? Had my fury pulled someone else into the undertow of my reality? Curiosity piqued, as I knew tomorrow would unveil secrets I never anticipated. Perhaps aid or even another twist in this increasingly tangled tale. The future was not yet written, and undeniably, in this web of treachery, I was only beginning to discover its spine-chilling depths. The morning light streamed in through the blinds of my cluttered kitchen, illuminating the mounting chaos around me. Frantic thoughts whirled in my head like autumn leaves caught in a tempest as I prepared to confront Karen Martinez, the realtor who had betrayed my trust in the most gut-wrenching way possible. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and confronting the woman who had sold my dreams to the highest bidder. I felt an unfamiliar fire igniting within me as I gripped the evidence I had gathered, ready to challenge the very embodiment of my unraveling world. I arrived at her office, the building's facade an unassuming facade that belied the storm brewing within me. As I stepped inside, Karen's syrupy smile greeted me like a treacherous siren, welcoming a sailor to ruin. "Just a little misunderstanding, right?" she chimed, casually perusing through some papers on her desk while I stood in front of her, fists clenched, ready to explode. The calmness in her demeanor only fueled my rage, the suffocating silence between us thick with tension as I clenched my jaw and fought to keep my composure. "You sold the same house to 2 families," I began, my voice rising as the anger bubbled over. "How could you do this?" The words tumbled out of me, each syllable filled with betrayal and disbelief that she could stand there, so nonchalant, while I felt my whole world crumbling into dust. But her calm gaze didn't waver. Instead, she leaned back in her chair with a lazy smile that twisted my stomach into knots, making me feel small and exposed. "You misunderstood the terms of the closing, dear," she replied, her voice dripping with saccharine condescension. Just as I was about to respond, she dropped a bombshell on me. "I guaranteed the other family would close first." My stomach lurched as her words pierced through my defenses, a cold wave of realization crashing over me. I wasn't just in a dispute over the house, I was ensnared in a web of deception I hadn't even known I was caught in. I felt like a pawn in her manipulative game, left floundering in the unpredictable tide of her calculations. What kind of guarantee is that? I spat, the heat of betrayal surging through my veins. I could hear the pounding of my heart echo in my ears, overwhelming in its intensity. Each lie she told was laced with half-truths, tugging at the threads of my reality and pulling me deeper into despair. I had trusted her implicitly, pictured her as an ally in my quest for homeownership. Yet now I stood before her, confronting the reality of her greed and betrayal. It took everything in me to keep my voice steady, to not crumble under the weight of her shattering revelations. How could one woman orchestrate such a mess and still look at me as though we were old friends? My thoughts spiraled further into chaos, images of both families fighting over the house flashing through my mind like a twisted montage. Each moment spent in that office became a pulse of agony, an acknowledgement that my dreams were now intertwined with so much deceit. Would either of us ever truly own the house we so desperately wanted? I was teetering on the edge of sanity. Every word that came out of her mouth only served to deepen my pit of despair. Karen leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands, waiting for my next move, as if the confrontation was part of a game she had long since mastered. The power dynamics shifted with every question I flung at her. But she was prepared, her responses polished, designed to dismiss my legitimate grievances with a flick of her wrist. I realized that, at that moment, I was just another pawn on her board. The fight in me surged as she continued to spew half-truth after half-truth, patching her manipulation with soothing lids of honeyed words. It hit me hard then, the lawsuit, the phone calls, the frantic emails, they were not merely cries for help or attempts to reclaim my life. They were all pieces I would lay on the table. I needed to expose her for what she truly was. Driven by a potent mix of determination and fury, my mind raced ahead, plotting my next steps in this dizzying nightmare. Leaving her office felt like breaking free from a hypnotic spell, but the road ahead was littered with uncertainty and frustration. The stakes were higher than ever. I had to ensure my voice was heard, my case was solid, and a glimmer of hope had entered my heart. Though fear gripped me, I felt alive. Ready to navigate through the mess, Karen had created a harrowing mission of unearthing the truth. But first, it was essential to lay the groundwork for a future battle against her elaborate schemes. I walked away from that office with a burning resolve that would not be extinguished. As the day slipped away into dusk, I refused to let the darkness of her betrayal overshadow my quest for justice. The ink on those baffling contracts lay heavy on my mind, procuring insights and teasing the secrets buried deep within them. I knew I had to dig even deeper before the next round, as something terrible lurked just beneath the surface, waiting to be exposed. My fight was just beginning. Karen would regret ever double-dipping in my dreams. With no other option and desperation clawing at my throat, I consulted a lawyer, hoping he would provide a beacon of clarity in this suffocating darkness. The sun glared down on me as I paced the waiting area of his office, my heart racing in tandem with my spiraling thoughts. The garish fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry hornets, but all I could focus on was the fate of my house, and whether I would ever be able to reclaim what was stolen from me by the scheming Karen Martinez. Would I find justice? Or was I merely setting myself up for a deeper fall? The meeting commenced with muted pleasantries, but the lawyer's cool demeanor instantly shifted as I recounted the harrowing tale of my battle against Karen's duplicity. His brow furrowed with concern as I described how both my family and another had signed contracts for the very same home, the absurdity of it sending waves of rage coursing through me. I leaned forward, desperate for reassurance and support, but as he scrutinized the documentation I had amassed, his expression turned grim, and I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet. At first, he spoke with confidence about our case, outlining the glaring ethics violations Karen had committed, each point echoing my own indignation. But just when I thought I had grabbed hold of a lifeline, the atmosphere darkened like a storm cloud on the horizon. My gut sank as he revealed that significant pieces of evidence were missing. Both Karen's contracts and the crucial phone records detailing her communication with the other family had reportedly vanished. It felt as if the very ground I stood on was being pulled away. Heart racing, I envisioned all the hurdles ahead, contemplating the implications of this loss. If those records remained undiscovered, how could we prove her guilt? It was as though Karen had orchestrated a stage play, hiding the pieces to her intricate puzzle just when we were poised to reveal the truth. I watched as my lawyer's confidence began to unravel like a tightly wound spool of thread, and I felt an icy grip close around my heart as the enormity of the situation set in. Could I truly be left to navigate this treacherous legal landscape alone? Each day felt like an eternity, with too many sleepless nights spent replaying the events in my mind like a broken record. It seemed impossible that Karen had evaded consequences so effortlessly, and it filled me with a sorrowful rage. I often thought about the lives she had shattered with her greed and deceit, including my own. What kind of person could betray so many, all while wearing a facade of charm and diabolical innocence? The weight of that injustice threatened to crush my spirit. And just when I had begun to think that perhaps fierce determination would drive me through this nightmare, Doubt crept in like a thief in the night. I felt like a lone warrior in a battle that was turning into a personal hell. With every passing day, the walls felt as if they were closing in, like the walls of a collapsing tunnel, and it seemed I was hopelessly isolated. My friends grew weary of my constant brooding, and the few who showed concern lacked the understanding I craved. I was left alone, battling darkness with only my conscience as my companion, as uncertainty swirled around like dust from a forgotten battlefield. Emerging from the legal haze, frustration simmered beneath the surface, igniting an unyielding fury that compelled me to act. I was not about to let Karen muffle my voice or steal my dreams. If others were plagued by her deceit, then I would find them and share our stories. With a renewed sense of purpose, I began to connect with the other family that shared my misfortune, our fates entwined in this absurd tragedy. I envisioned rallying together, pooling our evidence, and uncovering more about Karen's charade in an effort to expose her true character. The stakes were rising at a dizzying pace, yet I finally started to see glimpses of hope amid the chaos. What if we could gather enough information to tighten the noose around her, shedding light on her dubious transactions? The fire ignited within me once more, fueled by righteous anger, making my pulse quicken as I imagined the jubilant moments of victory that would follow. We were both victims of her betrayal, and partnering together could mean reclaiming what she perceivably had robbed from us. As night settled in, casting heavy shadows over what should have been my new home, I vowed to fight. The icy grip of despair loosened its hold on my heart, replaced instead by steely resolve to engage in whatever battle lay ahead. I would not rest until Karen Martinez faced the consequences of her deceit, her ill-gotten gains laid bare for the world to see. With each passing minute, I grasped the hope of justice and the promise of a new beginning, one that could turn the tables in my favor and restore the sense of security I had lost. Driven by tenacity and the fire of betrayal, I stood at the edge of the chaos, determined to navigate the murky waters of this nightmare with unwavering strength. The stakes were getting higher with every passing day, as I prepared to unravel the elaborate schemes Karen had clung to like a life raft, and I was resolute in my quest to expose her treachery once and for all. The battle reached a boiling point just as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across my living room. The walls, which once felt like a warm embrace, now loomed like indifferent spectators to my unfolding disaster. I felt muscles in my jaw tighten as I envisioned Karen Martinez spinning her web of lies and deceit, seemingly unfazed by the chaos she had created. Fueled by a cocktail of rage and desperation, I steeled myself to confront the storm head-on, convinced I was prepared to fight her in court. But then, as if the universe decided to douse my flickering flame of hope, my lawyer delivered a bombshell that shattered whatever resolve I had left. Karen has more dirt on everyone involved in this case, including you and me, he said, his voice a low growl that sent cold shivers racing down my spine. He explained that she had found legal loopholes so twisted that they could bind us in endless litigation. My dreams of homeownership began to disintegrate, and doubt seeped into my bones like a dense fog on a winter morning. Was Karen truly untouchable? Did her cunning mind envision a scenario where I would bow out gracefully, defeated and humiliated? My mind reeled as I grappled with the consequences of this revelation. It felt like I was being pulled into a maelstrom of despair, and the thought of waving a white flag ignited a fire within me, one I could neither comprehend nor extinguish. The idea of surrendering to a serpent like her felt like throwing myself into quicksand, but I was unsure of my strength to persist in this ominous fight. Each moment I spent twisting these thoughts in my head only served to heighten the sense of hopelessness clawing at my throat. Would I watch my precious dreams dissipate into the abyss, lost forever to someone like Karen? That same night, as I settled into bed, fingers curling into the sheets stained by stress, something landed with a thud on my doorstep. The faint sound echoed like a secret whisper during the stillness of the night, compelling me to rise and investigate. There it was, a thick envelope, unmarked yet pulsating with mystery. My heart raced with anticipation as I tore it open with shaking fingers, revealing a collection of documents that would send my pulse storming. The moments spent reading its contents unraveled into a fever dream of revelations that shattered the existing narrative in my mind. Each page I flipped revealed hidden truths about Karen's past dealing-share encounters with families like mine, who had fallen prey to her charm and duplicity before. Stories of deceit, woven into paper like a tapestry of betrayal, revealing a staggering number of homeowners who had faced similar fates. Karen had fed off the misfortune of so many innocent people, building a lucrative empire on the backs of our shattered dreams. It was horrifying and intoxicating to think that this was the woman I had been battling, and it thickened the desire for justice that pulsed in my veins. Glimmers of hope flickered through my mind, intertwining with the righteous anger boiling beneath the surface. I felt an electric charge as I pieced the information together, the inner workings of her betrayal and the intricate connections she had formed in the shadows. I had not just stumbled upon evidence. I had unearthed a blueprint of her malice, showing how she manipulated contracts and used backdoor deals to keep families at her mercy. The idea of standing before a judge armed with this revelation made my heart race with renewed purpose. I could hear my lawyer's voice in my head, echoing his earlier warnings, but I felt the tide turning in our favor. This new information would have the power to expose Karen's corrupt practices, tearing through her carefully constructed facade. I envisioned her arrogance melting away, that smug smile fading into sheer panic as her schemes unraveled. In my heart, a storm brewed. If I could confront her once more, this time brandishing the documents that could dismantle her empire, it might give us an advantage in this courtroom showdown. The clock ticked loudly in my quiet house, each tick igniting a frenzy of emotions, rage, fear, hope, and determination. I gathered the revelations whispering through the glowing pages in my trembling hands and prepared for the next strategic move. As I lined up the evidence, I knew that the fight was far from over. But at that moment, I felt a spark of confidence bloom within the chaos. As dawn broke, an unexpected glimmer of optimism lit up my resolve and turned my fear into ferocity. I could no longer be a passive participant in my life's narrative. It was time to reclaim my story from this cunning thief. I would brave the courtroom again, ready to confront Karen head-on with a renewed sense of purpose. And once and for all, I would expose her deceitful practices for all to see. This battle would not define me. I would be the author of my own narrative, leaving the shadows of manipulation behind. In this relentless quest for justice, with the mysterious envelope safely tucked away as my weapon, I was prepared for the adrenaline-pumping showdown that awaited. The time for silence was over. It was time to take back not just my home, but my life, from Karen Martinez. The stakes had never been higher, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of what was to come. Could I finally turn the tables in this twisted tale? The courtroom was electric with tension as I stood before the judge, the fluorescent lights overhead casting stark shadows on my face. The air was thick with anticipation, and the faint rustle of paper filled the space as I glanced toward the opposing table, where Karen Martinez loomed like a specter of deceit. There she was, all too comfortably encased in crisp attire, her insufferable smugness radiating with each condescending glance she shot my way. Thoughts raced through my mind, memories of the chaos she had orchestrated like a twisted symphony. I was prepared to confront her and unravel the treacherous tale of two buyers for one house. I took a deep breath, relying on the hidden power of the documents I'd received, which held a wealth of evidence against her. With my heart pounding in my chest, I gathered my notes and stepped forward. My lawyer had been nervous, unsure if we could pin Karen down, but with these revelations, she was about to find herself out of excuses. I cleared my throat and swallowed the lump that had become a constant companion over the past months, flipping through the pages in my hands as I prepared to present the damning evidence against her. When I began speaking, my voice trembled but grew steadier with each word I uttered. Your Honor, I stand before you to expose the manipulative practices of Realtor Karen Martinez, who sold one property to two separate families. We are not just battling over a house. We are fighting for integrity and justice in the real estate industry. Karen capitalized on our dreams, selling our hopes to the highest bidder. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder, and I could sense the collective outrage simmering beneath the surface. Karen's confident exterior began to crack as I unfolded the details of her elaborate scheme, one where she had virtually guaranteed two closings on the same property, pocketing commissions, while we languished in litigation. As I recounted the details of her deceit, I could see the disbelief reflected in the eyes of the other parties present. The judge leaned forward, absorbing my words with evident interest. Here, Your Honor, are documents corroborating my claims contracts bearing both our signatures and dates that confirm Karen's involvement in this deception. Each paper reveals her manipulation of numbers and contracts like a magician who thinks they can pull a rabbit out of thin air. There was a powerful stillness in the room as I dramatically presented the pile of evidence, every page ripping away at the illusion she had meticulously constructed. Karen, for the first time, dropped the facade. Her expression morphed from arrogance to shock as she realized I had come prepared to dismantle her game. I can explain, Your Honor. This is all a misunderstanding, she stammered, but the judge silenced her with a firm wave of his hand. I could hardly suppress a smile as the realization hit me that for once she was cornered, nowhere to run from the repercussions of her actions. The weight of my struggle was beginning to lift. She was exposed as the fraud she truly was, and the truth was finally surfacing from the depths of her lies. The judge, unyielding in his demeanor, turned to Karen with a piercing gaze. It is clear that your actions were unscrupulous and that you disregarded the integrity of your profession, Miss Martinez. I cannot overlook the damage you've caused, both emotionally and financially, to these innocent clients, he declared, each word resonating with the fervor of justice. My heart raced as he laid down the consequence of her betrayal. I felt relief wash over me, a cathartic wave that broke the dam of fear and uncertainty that had held me captive for so long. I hereby order you to pay restitution for the losses incurred by your reprehensible conduct, the judge finally stated, and the collective gasp echoed through the courtroom as I allowed myself to breathe deeply, feeling triumphant. The courtroom buzzed with a mixture of disbelief and admiration, As people began to murmur amongst themselves, whispering the validation of the wronged and a shared hope that this singular moment could deter others from falling prey to similar schemes. For the first time, I could see a light at the end of this dark tunnel, illuminated by the warm glow of fair retribution. As I walked out of the courtroom, my heart soared within me. The bitter taste of betrayal had transformed into sweet victory. The burden of her deceit was lifted, and I could finally step away from the shadows of fear and uncertainty. I had fought against a monster and emerged victorious. Her disbelief painted across her face was a sight I would cherish forever. It marked not just the end of her local treachery, but the restoration of my faith in the justice system and the belief that truth, no matter how buried, will always find a way to rise. Harmony would return to my life, unshackling me from the grip of dread, and allowing me to finally breathe, without fear of her treachery lurking just around the corner.